let's talk about my role as a mentor in the mental health program and really the mental health treatment program in general. So back in 2017, two guys came to me and said, "Look, we can't stop getting high and we want your help." And I said, "Well, what do you need? Like, how can we help?" And they said, "Look, we can't go anywhere. We can get drugs all the time in population. Even if we go to the hole, we can get drugs. Like, we need a place where we can go where we'll have the structure and support of people who don't want to get high." So we together went to go talk to mental health and we said, "Hey, we'd really like this if there was a sober pod or a sober program, or is this something you guys could do?" So they reached out to Richmond, to the central DOC, and what came back was the idea of, okay, like, we'll fund a pilot program, but it wasn't about drugs. It was about mental health and stability and people who are subject, at risk for predation. It was just like this whole complicated thing, but essentially it was designed to be a program to give people support. Because the problem is, at most you have 3 psych staff at a prison of 1,200 people. And if you have 10 seriously mentally ill, prisoners, they're taking up 90% of that psych staff's time. So they have 10% of that time left for the other, 1,050 or 1,100 or 1,200 people on the compound. And the math just doesn't work out. And no matter how well intentioned they are, how well meaning, or how well trained, they simply don't have the time and resources. So the idea for this program was peer support, basically saying, okay, let's find the guys in prison who have been successful, who have found a way through luck or good fortune or connections or whatever to kind of get their lives together. Let's allow them to support and teach the younger generation, or teach the guys that are really struggling. And the peer support worked as 2 things. One, it was using our experience and, kind of sharing that experience to help other people hopefully benefit from it. But 2, also being the nexus through which the actual official support happened. So if we have 64 guys in the pod and we have, 8 mentors or whatever, okay, so we have 58 guys who are needing help. Well, if they all say they need to see the psychologist, they all say there's an emergency, well, we try to see what we can accomplish on our own. Like, okay, before you go see the psychologist, let's talk about what's going on. Okay, you're not getting your TV channel? Okay, well, talking to the psychologist probably won't help. How about you and I go talk to the maintenance worker? How about we go talk to the sergeant about putting in a work order? And things literally as simple as that, because guys had gotten used to only going to the psych staff because they were the only people that listened. And we basically had to translate in many cases because they didn't always know how to communicate the best. But what we found was an experience that was incredibly meaningful because we were able to be there for other people. And even things as simple as that. This guy who's freaking out, he's absolutely obsessed about being able to watch wrestling, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. If we can get his TV fixed, well, guess what? That's going to make his day. All of a sudden, he's happy, he's joyous. We've changed the quality of his experience just by doing something simple that he wasn't able to do. And then the end goal is to teach him how to communicate that. Okay, if this ever happens again, rather than flipping out or going to the psych staff or screaming or, having a fit, let's figure out a way for you to communicate that. And the hope is that they learn these skills and continue to learn them and, succeed upon release. But it was just such a difficult experience at times because we didn't get a break, right? Like, the staff gets to go home. The staff gets to say, okay, well, I've done my 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever, and I go home. But at 11 o'clock at night, I have, Josh P knocking on my door because, oh my God, there's an emergency. And I couldn't get away. And it ended up being too much for all of us. Like, it ended up being a point where we were kind of cracking under the pressure because never getting a break and having the constant, issues that came up. And then guys really appreciating what we did, but also sometimes becoming dependent upon it. So finally, the mental health staff was like, look, you guys need to get away. We need to have mentor days or times that you can get away, or you can just be on your own and do your own thing. And that ended up being helpful. We'd kind of leave one mentor in the pod to deal with any issues that flared up, or to communicate with the psych staff. But basically, there were 3 things that we did. We worked with the guys one-on-one. We did journaling, or we did other activities. Sometimes we would just talk. Sometimes we'd, kind of go through a writing accountability plan, which was a program that I taught. And then, we would teach programs and we'd facilitate classes. And so it was a matter of, how do we get the material that we need in front of these guys? So a lot of guys would complain about hey, I don't know how to connect with my family, or I just feel like they're always going to judge me for the things that I've done. I need to find a way to move forward. So we did. We said, okay, well, let's do a family plan. And what they did, they went and did some research and then kind of modified the program to better fit the situation. And then we talked about, okay, how do we take accountability for our past actions and relationships? And how do we express our needs while understanding that we can't expect people to always meet them? Like, if we say, okay, we need, connection and we need this, well, we also have to understand what our family needs from us. We have to understand if they're unwilling. We have to, have these communication or have these conversations. So it was a really good experience, and the things that I was able to teach were so meaningful. So they trained us in teaching different elements of DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. So we taught emotional regulation, which is essentially how to deal with difficult and kind of out of control emotions, or not even out of control, but just emotions that feel big. We talked about distress tolerance, which is how do you sit in discomfort? How do you feel uncomfortable and not lash out or get high or self-harm or do something along those lines? And we taught mindfulness, which was kind of my favorite because I'd been involved in a meditation practice for years by then. And it was then, okay, how do we go from there? And so I started teaching nonviolent communication, which is an absolutely amazing program that is all about knowing yourself and then being able to express that to other people in a way that isn't aggressive and domineering, but nor is it kind of self-denying or self-negating, I guess. So we put these programs together, and then the one that I think I was most proud of was a program on accountability, which was, okay, I've been in prison for 19 years, or at that point it was like 15 years. And nobody's asked me to talk about what I did to get to prison. Like, nobody's asked me to take responsibility. Nobody's asked me to process, like, what happened and how I'm not ever going to be in that position again. And so that's what I did. I try to give guys the understanding that, all right, you've done these things. Like, you need to take responsibility for things you've done. You also need to understand that these weren't done usually from a rational, like, normal state of mind. You're not just a twisted person because you've done something. So as we talked about, like, influences and experiences growing up and the things that shaped us, and then it was about, okay, well, how can we do things differently? Like, how do we need to deal with these forces? Or how do we need to make different decisions or be around different people or have different coping mechanisms? So it was kind of an overarching idea of how can we take people, help them take responsibility for their actions, allow that to be the beginning of change, and then get them over the hump to where they are essentially different people that are not going to do the same things as they did, that are better prepared for the world, that are better prepared for difficult situations. And then on top of that, I taught Spanish, which was really fun because guys wanted to learn, and ended up originally it was like 4 guys wanted to learn Spanish, and then we had some Latino guys come in who wanted to learn English, so we had like a Spanish and an English class at the same time, and then they would start teaching each other outside of class and like pairing up, and it was really great for community as much as anything. And on the community side, I ran a Jeopardy game, which was just simple. And I remember this because when guys were in the hole, they used to do it. And I was like, man, we loved that when we were in the hole. Like, maybe there's a way to do this. So I went and did all this research at the library, and we didn't have access to the internet. So it's like looking at old textbooks or like looking at like pop magazines to find out who's number 1 on the charts or who's doing whatever. And then I put together all these Jeopardy things, and I got a big piece of paper, and I had to put sticky notes to like cover it up. Like, so if somebody took, pop songs for 100, I had to then cover it up with a sticky note. And at first there were only like 3 or 4 guys that wanted to do it, and they weren't sure, and like everybody was standing off. By the end of the first game, there was like 30 or 40 people over there. Everybody was screaming out answers. Everybody was excited. The next day, people were talking about it. And it was a chance for guys to come together and do something fun, which in prison, like, I think there's still this idea that you're not supposed to have fun, but then also have a shared experience and like build some sense of community and some sense of camaraderie. And that was really meaningful because I know the biggest thing for me in prison was feeling lonely and like feeling disconnected. I managed to find some really good guys, and I have some good friends. I have some relationships that have endured from there, but I always felt like I was missing out. I felt like there were things from the outside and romantic relationships that like all these things that I couldn't have. But what I learned was how to make a relationship in difficult circumstances, how to be a friend, how to make a friend, how to accept when I don't have the things that I want, when I don't have the ability to connect, but to, maybe connect deeper with myself in that situation. So in this, basically, the overall is being a mentor to other people was one of the best things for me. It taught me more about myself. It made me more understanding and more compassionate. It helped me get a better understanding of the people around me. It helped me better communicate. It was one of the best experiences of my life, and it really let me know that what I want to do, at least part of what I want to do, is connect with other people in some sort of role as a counselor or as a mentor, as a therapist, and I'm working towards that day by day.